Hey, everybody. It's the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm Aaron Maté, here with American comedian Kurt Metzger. I'm sitting in for Jimmy. And here is the story that recently dropped. This is from Seymour Hersh, one of the most impactful and decorated journalists of all time. And this is the headline: How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. The New York Times called it a mystery, but the U.S. executed a covert sea operation that was kept secret until now. And there's a picture of it. And this was back in September 2022, when these two major pipelines, the Nord Stream 2, connecting Russia to Germany, bringing cheap Russian energy to Germany and the rest of Europe, were bombed. And nobody wanted to think about who did it. We all kind of forgot about it. Well,
I watched clips where Jeffrey Sachs said the U.S. did it, and then some fat guy in a bow tie was like, "Well, how do you prove that?" And I was, none of them saw the clip of Biden saying, "We're going to do that."
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so we had all these U.S. officials promising that they would stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and yet even when someone did stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and it got blown up, people didn't want to make the connection between what U.S. officials had promised and what had just happened. Well, Seymour Hersh has just given us the inside scoop, and this is what he reports. Last June, Navy divers operating under the cover of a widely publicized midsummer NATO exercise known as Baltic Sea 22 planted the remotely triggered explosives that 3 months later destroyed 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines, according to a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. So what Hersh is saying here is that the U.S. used the cover of a NATO naval exercise to send divers deep below sea in the Baltic and to plant these bombs. And 3 out of 4 of them went off. The 4th one didn't. But that was enough to destroy the Nord Stream 2 pipelines, these 2 pipelines connecting Russia to Germany. According to Hersh, Biden's decision to sabotage the pipelines came after more than 9 months of highly secret back and forth debate inside Washington's national security community about how best to achieve that goal. For much of that time, the issue was not whether to do the mission, but how to get it done with no overt clue as to who was responsible. President Biden and his foreign policy team, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, and Victoria Nuland, had been vocal and consistent in their hostility to the 2 pipelines, which ran side by side for 750 miles under the Baltic Sea from 2 different ports in northeastern Russia near the Estonian border, passing close to the Danish island of Bornholm before ending in northern Germany. The direct route, which bypassed any need to transit Ukraine, had been a boon for the German economy, which enjoyed an abundance of cheap Russian natural gas, enough to run its factories and heat its homes, while enabling German distributors to sell excess gas at a profit throughout Western Europe. Action that can be traced to the administration would violate U.S. promises to minimize direct conflict with Russia. Secrecy was essential. From its earliest days, Nord Stream 1 was seen by Washington and its anti-Russian NATO partners as a threat to Western dominance. As long as Europe remained dependent on the pipelines for cheap natural gas, Washington was afraid that countries like Germany would be reluctant to supply Ukraine with the money and weapons it needed to defeat Russia. This is a key point. So if you're going to wage a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, you need your European allies on board, especially Germany, because Germany is the economic center of Europe. And the U.S. needs Germany on board to send weapons close by to Ukraine. But if Germany is receiving cheap Russian gas powering its economy, then it has an incentive to minimize conflict with Russia and not engage in a proxy war with it. So the U.S. solved that problem by blowing up this pipeline. And here's more from Hersh. In December of 2021, 2 months before the first Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Jake Sullivan convened a meeting of a newly formed task force. What became clear to participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of the 2 Nord Stream pipelines, and that he was delivering on the desires of the president.
And the president said this. I understand why this is such a drawn out. Biden straight up said we're going to do it. So how is it any kind of mystery? Like, how does it even get to Seymour Hersh has to write something?
Well, someone described Hersh as someone who is a master at deconstructing the obvious because our media works so hard to deny the obvious. So we need someone like Seymour Hersh who has the sources on the inside to come along and tell us the story, and he reveals it. And that date there of December 2021, when the planning gets underway, that's interesting because that's the same month that Russia presented the U.S. and NATO with really detailed draft treaties to resolve its concerns about Ukraine and NATO. The main ask from Russia was that Ukraine commit to not join NATO, and also that NATO roll back its military infrastructure and troops in certain states surrounding Russia, just the states that joined NATO after 1997. Not all states around Russia, but just certain states. Those were Russia's two main demands. And the U.S., instead of taking up that offer from Russia and trying to negotiate, taking those proposals seriously, and trying to resolve a crisis that was then growing over Ukraine, instead rejected the Russian offer and instead started planning to blow up the Nord Stream 2, which they knew was a major off-ramp to peace because Germany, if Germany was receiving Russian gas, then Germany would maybe be inclined to accept a peace deal with Russia. And Hersh goes on, throughout all this scheming, the source said, some working guys in the CIA and the State Department were saying, don't do this. It's stupid and will be a political nightmare if it comes out. Nevertheless, in early 2022, the CIA working group reported back to Sullivan's interagency group, we have a way to blow up the pipelines. So mission accomplished, and they did.
Will it be a political nightmare? It looks like nothing's going to happen to me.
No, it's not. Even though, as you said, Kurt, everyone's admitted to having the motive. So this is back in January 2022. Victoria Nuland, top U.S. official, who Seymour Hersh says was involved in the planning in this. This is what she said.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
So that's Nuland making that promise that Nord Stream 2, one way or another, will not move forward. And now we know what she was talking about. One of those ways was a bombing, right? And here's more. Here's Biden in February 2022.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
But prove it, though, Aaron.
And here is...
This is like if O.J. Simpson's If I Did It book.
Exactly. And here is, just to put the icing on top, here is Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, right after Nord Stream 2 was bombed in September of 2022. This is what Blinken said about it.
Ultimately, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the consequences of all of this are not borne by citizens in our countries, or for that matter, around the world.
And of course, what Blinken said there about doing everything U.S. can to help people not bear the consequences, he means selling them U.S. liquefied natural gas at a huge markup, making a big profit for the U.S. That's what he means by that.
Well, some good has to come from this.
And here's another one. This is most recently Victoria Nuland. She was before the Senate just a few weeks ago. And this is what she said about the Nord Stream 2. She's speaking to Senator Ted Cruz.
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
So there we go. Now we know why Victoria Nuland was so gratified and why multiple Biden administration officials, right up to the president himself, had promised to stop the Nord Stream 2 because they had plans to bomb it. And the revelation that the U.S. executed this plan comes from one of the most, if not the most, celebrated investigative journalists in U.S. history. And the media response to this is deafening silence. And we're going to talk more about that, but it speaks to how captured our media is, that they can't take even this revelation of a major act of international terrorism, destroying a huge piece of infrastructure to basically not just weaken Russia, but to break off an off-ramp to peace. That not even that revelation can get our media to do its job and look at this issue.
But won't it cause the war to escalate? They should love that.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And if that was the goal of blowing up this pipeline, the mission accomplished.
Doing live stand-up comedy in Tempe, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Nashville, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and become a premium member. Get access to all our content.